piece of shelf paper. I had largely given over my inquiries into Professor Angel called the Cthulhu cult, and was visiting a learned friend in Paterson, New Jersey, the curator of a local museum and a mineralogist of note. Examining one day the reserve specimens roughly set on the storage shelves in a rear room of the museum, my eye was caught by an odd picture in one of the old papers spread beneath the stones. It was the Sydney Bulletin. Mentioned for my friend has widely affiliations in all conceivable foreign parts, and the picture was a half-tone cut of a hideous stone image almost identical with that which Lovecraft had found in the swamp. Eagerly clearing the sheet of its precious contents, I scanned the item in detail and was disappointed to find it only of moderate length. What it suggested, however, was of the portentous significance to my flagging quest, and I carefully tore it out. It read as follows: Mystery derelict found at sea. Vigilant arrives with helpless armed New Zealand yacht in tow. One survivor and dead man found aboard. Tale of desperate battle and deaths at sea. Rescued seaman refuses particulars of strange experience. Odd idol found in his possession. Inquiry to follow. The Morrison Company's freighter Vigilant, bound from Velsborough, arrived this morning at its wharf in Darling Harbor. The Vigilant left Velsborough March 25th, and on April 2nd was driven considerably south of her course by exceptionally heavy storms and monster waves. On April 12th, the derelict was sighted, and though apparently deserted, was found upon boarding to contain one survivor in a half-delirious condition. The living man was clutching a horrible stone idol of unknown origin, about a foot in height, regarding whose nature authorities at Sydney University, the Royal Society, all profess complete bafflement. This man, after recovering his senses, told an exceedingly strange story of piracy and slaughter. Three of the Emma's men, including Captain Collins and First Mate Green, were killed, and the remaining 8, under Second Mate Johnson, proceeded to navigate the captured yacht, going ahead in their original direction to see if any reason for their ordering back existed. The next day, it appears, they raised and landed on a small island, although none is known to exist in that part of the ocean, and 6 of the men somehow died ashore, though Johnson is queerly reticent about this part of the story and and speaks only of their falling into a rock chasm. Later, it seems, he and one companion boarded the yacht and tried to manage her, but were beaten about by the storm. From that time till his rescue on the 12th, the man remembers little, and he does not even recall when William Bryden, his companion, died. Bryden's death reveals no apparent cause, and was probably due to excitement or exposure. This was all together with the picture of the hellish image, but what a train of ideas it started in my mind. Here were new treasures of data and the Cthulhu cult and evidence that it had strange interests at sea as well as on land. What motive prompted the hybrid crew to order back the Emma as they sailed with their hideous idol? March 1st, or February 28th according to the international dateline. The earthquake and storm had come. From Dunedin, the Alert and her noisome crew had darted eagerly forth. That evening, after a day of hurried cabbling and arranging, I bade my host adieu and took a train for San Francisco. In less than a month, I was in London, where, however, I found that little was known of the strange cult members who lingered in the old sea taverns. Waterfront scum was far too common for special mention. After that, I went to Sydney and talked profitlessly with seamen and members of the Vice Admiral Court. I saw the Alert, now sold and in commercial use at Circular Quay in Sydney Cove, but gained nothing from its non-committal bulk. The crouching image with its cuttlefish head, dragon body, scaly wings, and hieroglyphed pedestal was preserved in the museum at Hyde Park. I studied it long and well, finding it a thing of baleful, exquisite workmanship, and with the same utter mystery, terrible antiquity, and unearthly strangeness of material which I had noted in Legrassi's smaller specimen. Geologists, the curator told me, had found it a monstrous puzzle, for they vowed that the world held no rock like it. Then I thought with a shudder of what old Castro had told Legrassi about the primal great ones. They had come from the stars and had brought their images with them. persuading the widow that my connection with her husband's technical matters was sufficient to entitle me to his manuscript. I bore the document away and began to read it on the London boat. It was a simple rambling thing, a naive sailor's effort at a post facto diary, and strove to recall day by day that last awful voyage. I cannot attempt to transcribe it, but I will tell its gist enough to show why the sound of the water against the vessel's sides became so unendurable to me that I stopped my ears with cotton. Johnson, thank God, did not know quite all, even though he saw the city and the thing, but I shall never sleep calmly again when I think of the horrors that lurk behind life in time and space, and of those unhallowed blasphemies from elder stars which dream beneath the sea, known and favored by a nightmare cult, ready and eager to lose them on the world whenever another earthquake shall have their monstrous stone city again to the sun and air. Johnson's voyage had begun just as he told it, to the Vice Admiralty. The Emma in ballast had cleared Auckland on February 20th, and had felt the full force of the earthquake-born tempest which must have heaved up from the sea bottom the horrors that filled men's dreams. Once more under control, the ship was making good progress when held up by the alert on March 22nd. I could feel the mate's regret as he wrote of her bombardment and sinking, of the swarthy, cult fiends on the alert. He speaks with significant horror. There was something peculiarly abominable quality about them which made their destruction seem almost a duty. The nightmare corpse city of Raleigh, that was built in measureless aeons behind history by the vast loathsome shapes that seeped down from the dark stars. There lay great Cthulhu and his hordes, hidden in grim slimy vaults, and sending out at last, after cycles incalculable, the thoughts that spread fear to the dreams of the sensitive, and called imperiously to the faithful to come on a pilgrimage of liberation and restoration. All this Johnson did not suspect, but God knows he soon saw. listened, and everyone was listening still when it lumbered into sight and squeezed its gelatinous green immensity through the black doorway into the tainted outside air of the poison city of madness. Poor Johnson's handwriting almost gave out when he wrote of this. Of the 6 men who never reached the ship, he thinks 2 perished of pure fright. The thing cannot be described. There is no language for such abyss of shrieking and immortal lunacy, such eldritch contradictions of all matter, force, and cosmic order. What wonder that across the earth a great architect went mad, and poor Wilcox raved with fear that the telepathic instant. The thing of the idols, the green sticky spawn of the stars, had awakened to claim his own. The stars were right again in what an age-old cult had failed to do by design. A band of innocent sailors had done by accident, after vigilations of years. Great Cthulhu was loose again and ravening for delight. Three men were swept up by the flabby claws before anybody turned. God rest them, if there be any rest in the universe. They were Donovan, Guerra, and Exstorm. Parker slipped as the other 3 were plunging over the endless vistas of green-crusted rock to the boat, and Johnson swears he was swallowed up by an angle of masonry which shouldn't have been there. So only Bryden and Johnson reached the boat and pulled desperately for the alert as the mountainous monstrosity flopped down the slimy stones and hesitated at the edge of the water. image rose above the unclean froth like the stern of a demon. The awful squid head with writhing feelers came nearly up to the bowsprit of the sturdy yacht, but Johnson drove on relentlessly. There was a bursting, as of an exploding bladder, a slushy nastiness, as of a cloven sunfish, a stench as of 1,000 open graves, and the sound of a chronicler would not put on paper. For an instant the ship was befouled by an acrid, blinding green cloud, and there was only a venomous seething astern, where God in heaven, the scattered plasticity of that nameless sky spawn, was recombining in its hateful original form, while its distance widened every second as the alert gained impetuous from its mounting stem. After that, Johnson only brooded over the idol in the cabin and attended to a few matters of food for himself and the laughing maniac by his side. He did not try to navigate after the first bold flight, for the reaction had taken something out of his soul. Then came the storm of April 2nd, and a gathering of clouds about his consciousness. There is a sense of spectral whirling through the liquid gulfs of infinity. Out of that dream came rescue, the vigilant, the Vice Admiralty Court, the streets of Dundon, and the long voyage back home to the old house by Edgeburg. He could not tell. They would think him mad. He would write of what he knew before death came, but his wife must not guess. Death would be a boon if only it could blot out the memories. That was the document I read, and now I have placed it in the tin box beside the bas-relief and the papers of Professor Angel. With it shall go this record of mine, the test of my own sanity, wherein it's pieced together that which I hope may never be pieced together again. I have looked upon all the universe has to hold of horror, and even the skies of spring and the flowers of summer must ever afterward be poison to me. But I do not think my life will be long. As my uncle went, as poor Johnson went, so shall I go. I know too much, and the cult still lives. Cthulhu still lives too, I suppose again in the chasm of stone which has shielded him since the sun was young. His accursed city is sunken once more, for the vigilant sailed over the spot after this April storm. But his ministers on earth still bellow and prance and slay around idol-caped monoliths in lonely places. He must have been trapped by the sinking while within his black abyss, or the world would by now be screaming with fright and frenzy. Who knows the end? What has risen may sink, and what has sunk may rise. Loathsome waits and dreams in the deep and decay spreads over the tottering cities of men. A time will come, but I must not and cannot think. Let me pray that if I do not survive this